Scott, Long, you made some really interesting comments at the Williams Institute event about the relationship between sex and sex law and neoliberalism. Could you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, around the world, there are existing sex laws being strengthened, there are new sex laws being passed. In Egypt, you have people being jailed for homosexuality and for being HIV positive under what's actually a prostitution law that dates from the 50s. In Burundi, Nigeria, you have people trying to pass new laws against homosexual conduct. In innumerable countries, you have laws on sex work that are just used to persecute people for the way they look, the way they behave in public space. And I think what we're seeing globally is an increasing reliance on criminal law as an instrument of social policy. And one reason this is happening, I believe, is that neoliberalism, the processes we call neoliberalism, which basically involve Western governments stripping governments in the developing world of their capacity to defend social welfare, to provide social services. All that neoliberalism has left those states is the police power. And so the police power is the only kind of social intervention they can imagine. And so you have countries, you actually have model laws that are being proposed internationally, which urge countries to fight HIV by criminalizing HIV transmission. In other countries, you have a belief that the only way the state can justify its existence is by policing privacy, policing public spheres to quote-unquote defend public morals. And I think buried at the heart of this is the kind of redefinition of what states and what governments are for. That is part of the shadowy legacy of neoliberalism.
And you also noted, I think, that in your view, this sort of taken to its logical conclusion, it really amounts to even neo-colonialism in the developing world.
In a very literal sense, because the basis of colonial law, as it was imposed on countries by the colonizers in the 19th century, was exactly the antithesis of, what is written over the entrances to most law schools, something about equality, justice, and light. Colonial law was about the antithesis of equality. It was about creating categories of people and ensuring that they had different rights. In a sense, to get sort of technical about it, I would say colonial law was the epitome of what Carl Schmitt was talking about as a perpetual state of emergency, in which the state always had the power to retract rights from people it didn't like. And yes, we are seeing in post-colonial states, now that they've been stripped down to the bare bones where policing is all they do, we've been seeing a return of that conception of the law as taking away equal citizenship and creating categories of inequality. We've also been seeing it in the developed world, because again and again, what the developed world does to the colonial world comes home. I think there are many ways to think about what happened to the United States under the era of conservative neocon rule, but one way of thinking of it actually, I think, is treating a large part of our own population as a colonized population. And the war on drugs, or the war on people who use drugs, internationally the war on terror, or the war on people who live in terror, I think are ways in which we've taken those colonial inequalities to home and ensure that people have unequal access to services, to health, to justice, to rights across the board.
Great. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you so much.